The camera pans across the opulent interior of the hotel, sunlight streaming through towering glass windows, illuminating the polished marble floor. Behind every shimmering chandelier and spotless surface, there's someone who makes the magic happen. Emily, mid-30s, with an apron and a gentle smile, carefully dusts a golden-framed mirror. Her hands are steady, her movements precise. Emily works as a cleaning lady at the prestigious Solace Heights Hotel. Admired by staff and guests alike, her warmth and tireless dedication have earned her a quiet but cherished place in this luxury haven. She greets a hotel guest with a nod, her smile faltering slightly as she passes a portrait of the hotel founder, a man with piercing eyes, eerily similar to those in a photo she keeps in her pocket. But behind her serene exterior lies a storm. The mysterious death of her father years ago left a void she has never been able to fill. In the staff locker room, Emily holds an old photograph of her father, her expression a mix of sorrow and determination. Today, her world is about to change. A forgotten past will resurface, and long-buried secrets may finally come to light. Glimpses of Emily discovering a hidden letter, a stranger watching her from afar, and her footsteps echoing in the dark corridors of the hotel flash across the screen. Stay with us to uncover the truth. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more mysteries. Emily steps into the Grand Wilson suite, her cart stocked with cleaning supplies. The space exudes opulence, floor-to-ceiling windows, plush furnishings, and the faint aroma of Amanda Wilson's expensive perfume. Emily quietly gets to work, starting with the ornate coffee table scattered with fashion magazines and half-empty glasses of champagne. As she tidies the room, muffled voices filter in from the adjoining bedroom. Emily hesitates, then continues dusting, trying to focus on her task. The voices grow louder, sharp enough to catch snippets of the conversation. "You're sure it'll look like an accident?" A woman's voice, cold and firm, cuts through the silence. Emily freezes. That's Amanda. She's always been polite, yet distant during their encounters, her impeccable appearance masking an air of calculation. "Of course," a man responds. "The cliffs are perfect. No one will suspect a thing." Emily's heart pounds. She glances toward the bedroom door, slightly ajar. Should she leave? Pretend she heard nothing? But the words keep coming, each one heavier than the last. "He trusts me," Amanda says, her tone almost amused. "This trip will be his last." Emily's grip tightens on the duster in her hand. It takes her a moment to process the gravity of what she's hearing. A plot to kill James Wilson? The billionaire who tips generously and greets every staff member by name? Her breath quickens as the pieces fall into place. Amanda, with her lover Ryan, conspiring to stage a tragedy during an upcoming trip. Emily leans against the cleaning cart, her mind racing. This isn't a scandal she can ignore. It's a life-or-death situation. She tries to steady herself, but questions flood her thoughts. What if they realize she overheard? What if she says nothing, and James dies? Fear coils in her stomach. She feels trapped, standing in the middle of the suite like an unwilling participant in a nightmare. The voices stop suddenly. Emily tenses as footsteps approach the door. She quickly grabs a glass and a cloth, pretending to polish it when Amanda steps out, her expression calm, her designer dress pristine. Amanda barely glances at Emily. "Make sure everything's spotless," she says curtly before disappearing down the hallway. Emily exhales shakily, glancing toward the bedroom. She hears the man, Ryan presumably, moving around. Not wanting to risk being seen, she grabs her cart and slips out of the suite, her hands trembling. In the corridor, Emily pauses, pressing her back against the wall. Her heart feels like it might burst. She's just a cleaning lady. This isn't her battle. But as she pictures James Wilson's kind smile and Amanda's icy demeanor, a sense of duty begins to outweigh her fear. By the time Emily reaches the staff elevator, her decision is made. She doesn't know how, but she can't stay silent. The elevator doors close behind her, and Emily clenches her fists. Her quiet world has just been shattered, and there's no turning back. Emily spent the rest of her shift in a haze, the weight of the overheard conversation pressing on her chest. Every step felt heavier than the last, and her usually steady hands fumbled with tasks she could perform blindfolded. She avoided eye contact with her co-workers, afraid her face would betray the storm inside her. By the time her shift ended, she knew what she had to do. Warning James felt impossible. How could someone like her approach a man like him? But the alternative was unthinkable. That evening, as guests moved about the hotel's grand lobby, Emily lingered near the private lounge where James often met clients. Her palms were damp, her stomach twisting with nerves. When she finally spotted him, she almost lost her resolve. James was sitting in a corner, his broad shoulders relaxed as he scanned a set of documents. He looked unbothered, far from a man whose life might be in danger. Taking a deep breath, Emily walked over, her heart pounding in her ears. "Mr. Wilson," she said softly, her voice trembling. He looked up, surprised to see her. "Emily, isn't it?" he asked, offering her a polite smile. "Yes, sir," she replied. "I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something important I need to tell you." James gestured to the chair across from him, his expression turning serious. "Go ahead." Emily hesitated, her words tangling in her throat. How could she explain this without sounding unhinged? Finally, she said, "I overheard something while I was cleaning your suite. I don't think it's safe for you to go on your trip." James's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" She glanced around, lowering her voice further. "Your wife and another man, they're planning to hurt you. They want to make it look like an accident." For a moment, James just stared at her. Then he leaned back in his chair, letting out a small, disbelieving laugh. "Emily, that's quite the accusation. Amanda would never do something like that." Emily felt her face flush. "I know it sounds crazy, but I heard them. They were talking about cliffs and an accident." James shook his head, his smile fading into something colder. "You must be mistaken. Amanda loves me, and Ryan, he's her business partner. This doesn't make any sense." Emily stood, feeling the sting of dismissal. "I just thought you should know," she said, her voice steady despite her rising panic. "You've always been kind to me, and I couldn't stay quiet about this." James watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "All right," he said finally. "I'll think about what you've said, but I hope you understand how serious this is. If you're wrong—" "I'm not," Emily interrupted, her tone firmer than she intended. Later that night, James sat alone in his study, Amanda's recent behavior replaying in his mind. The hushed phone calls, the sudden insistence on the trip. It all felt different now. By morning, the decision was made. James cancelled the trip without fanfare. When he passed Emily in the hall, he stopped and offered a quiet, heartfelt, "Thank you." Emily nodded, her relief tempered by the knowledge that the danger might not be over. The following morning, Emily was back at work, her movements slow and deliberate. Though James had cancelled the trip, the weight of what she had done still lingered. She kept her head down, hoping to avoid Amanda, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. Midway through her shift, a call came to the staff room. It was for Emily. Confused, she picked up the phone, her voice tentative. "This is Emily." "It's James Wilson," came the familiar voice on the other end. "Can you meet me in the private lounge when you're free? I have something for you." Emily's grip tightened on the receiver. "Of course, sir. I'll be right there." Minutes later, she arrived at the lounge, her nerves rekindled. James was seated by the window, a sleek black envelope in his hand. He gestured for her to sit, his expression softer than it had been the last time they spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me," he began. "You didn't just protect me. You risked a lot by coming forward. I can't thank you enough." Emily opened her mouth to reply, but James held up a hand. "I know what you'll say. You were just doing what you thought was right, but that kind of courage deserves recognition." He slid the envelope across the table toward her. Emily hesitated before picking it up, her hands trembling. Inside was a key, its brass surface gleaming in the light, and a neatly folded note. "The key is to an apartment," James explained. "I keep it for staff who might need a place to stay temporarily. Consider it yours for as long as you need." Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Mr. Wilson, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll use it," he said, his tone firm but kind. "And read the note when you have time. It'll explain everything." She nodded, clutching the envelope tightly as she stood to leave. James offered her a faint smile. "You've earned this, Emily. Don't doubt that." Later that evening, after her shift ended, Emily stood outside the apartment door. The building was modest but well-maintained, tucked away on a quiet street. The key turned easily in the lock, and the door creaked open to reveal a cozy space. Emily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. There was a small kitchen, a sunlit living area, and a bedroom with neatly made sheets. On the desk in the corner was a box, slightly worn but carefully placed. Curious, she approached the desk and opened the box. Inside were several documents and a photo that made her breath catch. It was her father, younger and smiling, standing beside a much younger James Wilson. The papers beneath the photo bore official seals and signatures, their contents hinting at something far more complicated than Emily had ever imagined. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, her pulse quickening with each discovery. The apartment suddenly felt different. Not just a place to stay, but a door to a past she thought had been buried forever. Emily sat at the small desk in her new apartment, the scattered documents casting shadows under the dim lamp. Her father's face stared back at her from the photograph, his warm smile pulling at memories she'd buried long ago. She traced the edges of the picture with her finger, her mind racing. Why was James connected to her father? And why now, after all these years, was this being brought to light? The questions swirled in her head, refusing to settle. Sleep was a distant thought, so she kept reading, hoping for some clarity. One document, stamped with a date from 2 decades ago, caught her eye. It was a notice of investigation tied to a financial scandal at a company her father had once mentioned in passing. Emily frowned. She remembered his long hours, the weight he carried on his shoulders, and his abrupt decision to quit. The knock at her door startled her, pulling her out of her thoughts. She hesitated before answering, her heart pounding. Standing in the hallway was a tall man with sharp features and a tired but kind expression. He held up a badge, the name Detective Martinez glinting under the hallway light. "Emily?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. She nodded, clutching the door. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I think I'm the one who can help you," he replied. "May I come in?" "It's about your father." Emily stepped aside, her curiosity outweighing her caution. Martinez entered, his gaze sweeping over the apartment before settling on the desk. The scattered documents seemed to confirm something for him, and he gave a small nod. "I've been looking for you," he said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "After your father's death, I tried to get in touch with your family, but things didn't work out." Emily sat across from him, her fingers twisting together. "You knew my father?" Martinez nodded. "We worked together years ago. He was a good man, Emily, honest and loyal, but someone wanted him out of the way." Emily's stomach sank. "What do you mean?" The detective leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Your father was framed for embezzlement, The evidence was planted, the charges fabricated. He tried to fight it, but the people behind it were powerful. Emily's throat tightened. Who did this to him? Amanda's family, Martinez said, the words landing like a hammer. They owned the company he worked for. When he uncovered irregularities in their accounts, they made him the scapegoat. It ruined his career and his reputation. He never recovered. The room seemed to close in around Emily. Her father had always been a source of strength and kindness, but she'd never fully understood the depth of the pain he carried. "Why didn't anyone stop them?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "They were untouchable back then," Martinez said. "But things have changed. Amanda's family may have fallen from power, but she's still dangerous. And if she thinks you're digging into this, she won't hesitate to silence you." Emily swallowed hard, the weight of Martinez's words pressing down on her. The connection between Amanda and her father was more sinister than she'd ever imagined, and she was right in the middle of it. Emily stared at the pile of documents spread across the table, her mind buzzing with Martinez's words. The truth about her father's downfall was a bitter pill to swallow, but it also lit a fire in her she hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about justice for James anymore, it was personal. The next morning, she mustered her courage and requested a meeting with James. It was risky, but she couldn't do this alone. In the quiet of his private study, Emily laid the photo and the key documents in front of him. "I need you to see this," she said, her voice steady but urgent. James leaned forward, scanning the papers. As he read, his expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to anger. "This is Amanda's family?" he asked, his tone hard. Emily nodded. "They destroyed my father's life, and now she's trying to do the same to you." James sat back, the weight of the revelation sinking in. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he let out a long breath. "We need proof, enough to expose her for everything she's done." Emily hesitated. "That's going to be dangerous. Amanda already suspects you. If she catches on—" "She won't," James said firmly. "I'll handle her, but I can't do this without you. You know how to stay invisible, how to listen when no one thinks you're there. If we work together, we can take her down." Emily swallowed her fear and nodded. "Okay, but we have to be smart. She's already watching you closely." Their first step was to access Amanda's personal files, which were kept in a locked cabinet in the master suite. James devised a plan to lure her out of the hotel, giving Emily enough time to search. That evening, Amanda left for an impromptu dinner with friends, her sharp smile hiding the suspicion that had been building over the past few days. James played his part perfectly, acting indifferent and even slightly aloof. As soon as she was gone, Emily slipped into the suite. Her heart raced as she moved quickly, opening drawers and scanning through folders. She finally found what she was looking for, a set of ledgers and correspondence that detailed shady business deals, some tied to her father's case, and others implicating Amanda in more recent schemes. But before she could leave, the sound of footsteps in the hallway froze her in place. Amanda had returned early. Emily ducked into the closet, clutching the documents tightly. She held her breath as Amanda entered the room, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Emily could hear her muttering something about James, her tone sharp and accusing. It felt like an eternity before Amanda left the room again. Once the coast was clear, Emily slipped out and made her way to James's office. When she laid the documents on his desk, James stared at them, a mixture of triumph and apprehension in his eyes. "This is enough to start building a case," he said. "But Amanda's not going to let us do this quietly." Emily nodded, the weight of the danger ahead pressing down on her. "We'll just have to stay one step ahead." The alliance was forged, but both knew the battle was just beginning. The weight of their plan hung heavily on Emily and James. Every move had to be calculated, every word carefully chosen. As they pieced together their case against Amanda, the next logical step was to confront Ryan. He was the key. A man who had helped her orchestrate the plot against James and likely held more secrets than he knew how to protect. Emily knew Ryan would be hard to break, but she also knew that his arrogance would be his downfall. James had arranged a meeting under the guise of a casual conversation. They would make him believe they were on his side, then corner him with the truth. Ryan agreed to meet James at a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of town, a place where he could be discreet. Emily and James arrived first, sitting in a quiet corner. Ryan hadn't yet shown up, but James was already scanning the room, his gaze sharp and calculating. "Do you think he'll talk?" Emily asked quietly, her fingers tapping nervously on the table. "He will," James replied, his voice steady. "Ryan's a coward at heart. He just needs the right push." When Ryan walked in, his confident swagger faltered slightly when he saw the two of them waiting. His eyes darted between Emily and James before settling on James with a forced smile. "James, what's this all about?" Ryan asked, his tone cool but wary. James leaned forward, keeping his voice low but firm. "We know what you've been doing with Amanda. You're not as untouchable as you think." Ryan's expression flickered, but he quickly masked it with a smirk. "You've got nothing on me." "Oh, I think we do," James replied. "We've already gathered enough to bring Amanda down. The only question is, where do you stand? Are you going to help us, or are we going to have to make you?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his confidence starting to crack. Emily watched him closely, waiting for the right moment. "Listen," Ryan said, his voice suddenly lower. "I don't want to end up in jail over this. Amanda's dangerous. You think you can just take her down like that. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Then help us," Emily urged, her tone calm but firm. "Where are the files? The ones that will incriminate Amanda? We know you're hiding them." Ryan's eyes darted to the door, as if considering an escape. But Emily wasn't about to let him off the hook. "You can't outrun this. If you give us the location, we can protect you. But if you stay silent, you'll go down with her. And you know she won't protect you when it all comes crashing down." There was a long pause as Ryan weighed his options, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. Finally, he exhaled sharply, defeated. "Fine. You want the files? They're at Amanda's estate, in the old study, behind a hidden panel in the wall. She keeps them locked away in a safe." Emily and James exchanged a glance. It was the break they needed. "Thank you," James said, his voice softer now, but no less firm. "We'll take it from here." Ryan seemed relieved to be free of their pressure, but the look in his eyes told Emily everything. He knew the game was up. As they left the bar, Emily's mind raced. The next step was crucial, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like they were on the right path. The estate loomed ahead, its grand architecture almost mocking the urgency of their mission. The night had fallen, and the sprawling property was silent, save for the distant rustle of leaves in the cool breeze. Emily and James stood by the iron gates, the weight of the stolen moment hanging between them. They had no time to waste. Every second counted. They'd managed to get inside without raising alarm, using the cover of darkness to blend in. The old study was located at the far end of the estate, tucked away from the main house in a secluded wing. Amanda wouldn't expect them to be so bold, but Emily and James had come prepared. "Stay close," James whispered, his voice steady as he checked the map they'd drawn from Ryan's confession. "We'll need to move fast once we're inside." Emily nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. The hidden panel in the study, the safe behind it, all of it was a risky endeavour. Amanda was sure to have some sort of protection in place, but Emily knew they couldn't turn back now. The study door creaked as they entered, the faint light from a nearby window casting long shadows on the polished floor. Emily's eyes immediately searched the wall for the hidden panel Ryan had described. She moved cautiously, her hand brushing against the wood, feeling for the secret latch. Meanwhile, James kept watch by the door, his posture tense. Every minute they spent here increased the risk of discovery. He could already hear the faint sounds of footsteps echoing in the distance, and it wasn't long before the air felt thicker with danger. "Got it," Emily whispered, her fingers finding the hidden switch. The panel slid open with a soft click, revealing a steel safe embedded in the wall. The tension in Emily's chest eased just slightly, but she knew the real work was about to begin. James moved quickly to her side, his hands steady as he examined the lock. "I've got this," he said, pulling a set of tools from his bag. His skill at cracking safes was impressive, and Emily couldn't help but admire the way he worked with such precision. As the safe door clicked open, the sound of approaching footsteps reached their ears. James's eyes widened in alarm. "We don't have much time." But before either of them could react, the door flew open and two of Amanda's henchmen burst into the room. Emily's heart raced, but she didn't freeze. Instinct kicked in. Without thinking, she grabbed the first object she could find, a heavy, ornate vase, and threw it toward the open doorway. The vase crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces and drawing the men's attention. They hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough for Emily to slip past them, weaving through the shadows. "Go!" she shouted to James, who was still at the safe. He grabbed the files, shoving them into a bag with urgency. Emily darted down the hallway, adrenaline surging through her veins. The henchmen were close behind, their footsteps pounding against the wooden floor. She turned a corner and ducked into a side room, pressing herself against the wall as they ran past. Her breath was shallow, but she kept moving, outsmarting them at every turn. She ducked into another corridor, leading them away from James and buying him precious time. Meanwhile, James was already making his way toward the back exit, the files secured. He knew they had to leave now or risk getting trapped. Emily would catch up, she always did. Just as the henchmen realized they'd been tricked, Emily reappeared, charging toward the nearest door. They lunged at her, but she was faster, slipping out into the garden, her breath catching in her throat as she sprinted toward the fence. She could hear the men shouting in frustration behind her, but she didn't look back. She knew James was waiting, and the evidence they had would finally bring Amanda to justice. The adrenaline of the chase had barely worn off when Emily and James made it to the edge of the estate. They were breathless but determined, the stolen evidence clutched tightly between them. The sounds of pursuit were now distant, but the danger was far from over. They had one more task to complete, ensuring Amanda was held accountable for everything she'd done. As they made their way to the car, Emily glanced back at the looming mansion behind them. Amanda's empire was crumbling, piece by piece. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing they had what it took to end it. They reached the safety of the car, and James quickly started the engine. Emily turned to him, her voice urgent. "We can't wait. We need to hand this over to the police. We can't let her slip away." James nodded, his eyes hard with determination. "I'll make the call on the way. We'll make sure she's caught." The drive to the nearest police station felt like an eternity. Emily sat in the passenger seat, her fingers tightly gripping the documents that would finally bring the truth to light. Her mind raced with the thought of the trial ahead, the public exposure of Amanda's crimes, and the vindication of her father's name. When they arrived at the station, James was already on the phone with Detective Martinez, arranging the details for Amanda's capture. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her when he hung up, his face grim but hopeful. "Amanda won't be able to talk her way out of this," James said. "The evidence we have is undeniable. She's done." They spent the next hour making sure everything was in place, the authorities fully aware of what they were dealing with. As they left the station, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unfinished. Later that day, news reports began to spread about Amanda's arrest. The once untouchable socialite was now facing charges that spanned decades of manipulation, corruption, and conspiracy. The press had a field day, and the public's shock at the truth sent ripples through the elite circles Amanda had once ruled. But for Emily, the real victory came in the form of a small, private moment. She sat alone in her apartment, the weight of the past few days pressing down on her as she reflected on the journey. It wasn't just about exposing Amanda. It was about reclaiming her father's legacy, clearing his name from the false accusations that had haunted him for so long. As the trial began, Emily watched from the sidelines, knowing that the truth had finally been revealed. Amanda's lies had crumbled, and her influence had vanished. The case against her was airtight, and it wasn't long before the court found her guilty on all charges. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but Emily remained calm. Her father's name had been cleared, and the justice he had been denied for so many years was finally being served. The weight on her shoulders seemed to lift, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt free. James stood beside her as the trial concluded, offering a quiet nod of approval. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it." Emily smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. "We did it." The sun rose gently over the city, casting a soft glow across Emily's new apartment. The walls, once bare, now held the promise of a fresh start. It had been a long, painful journey, but Amanda's arrest had opened the door to something brighter. Emily could finally breathe without the weight of the past hanging over her. Each day she found herself growing stronger, more confident. The apartment James had gifted her had become her sanctuary. It was a space where she could heal and rebuild, one step at a time. There were moments of silence, moments when the absence of her father's presence felt heavy, but she was learning how to carry it without letting it break her. James checked in on her regularly, offering support and encouragement. He never asked for anything in return, he simply stood by her side as a friend. That was the greatest gift of all. Their bond had grown over the course of the past few months, and though Emily hadn't expected it, she found herself looking forward to their conversations. "I'm proud of you," James said one evening as they sat on the balcony, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "You've come so far." Emily smiled softly, feeling a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. "I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself." James grinned, his usual confidence softening. "You're stronger than you think, Emily. You've got a heart that can't be broken." With Amanda behind bars, Emily had the space to honour her father's memory in a way she hadn't been able to before. She started volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who had experienced loss or hardship. Each person she helped reminded her that no matter how dark life could get, there was always a chance for a new beginning. Her work at the shelter became a source of strength and purpose. She saw echoes of her own struggle in the people she helped, each one fighting their own battles, trying to rebuild their lives. Emily knew what it felt like to feel hopeless, but she also knew the power of persistence and compassion. By offering support to others, she was not only healing herself, but also honouring her father's legacy. One afternoon, as Emily stood in front of the shelter, watching the people she had helped leave with a glimmer of hope in their eyes, she felt a quiet peace. She had found a new purpose, one that wasn't defined by her past, but by the strength she had discovered within herself. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time, she was ready to face it with courage and determination. Her father's name had been cleared, and she had finally found a way to honour him by living a life filled with kindness and resilience. The new chapter in Emily's life was just beginning. And though the future remained uncertain, she knew that whatever came next, she was no longer the same person who had started this journey. She was stronger, wiser, and more capable than she had ever been before. As Emily looked out at the horizon, a sense of hope filled her heart. She had found her peace, and with it, her purpose. If you've enjoyed Emily's journey and the twists and turns of this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more exciting content. What will happen next? You won't want to miss it.